Thank you very much.
Order. A point of order, Mrs. Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In The Independent on Sunday yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister was quoted as saying that he wants to recruit 65,000 new early years workers by September 2013, including 2,000 in Birmingham alone. However, the Daily Mail are reporting a Department of Education source is saying that the real figure will actually be closer to 12,000 across the country. Mr. Speaker, as this is a significant area in matter of policy, have you been informed that the government intend to come to the House to set the record straight so that members know whether the Deputy Prime Minister was right or wrong in what he told The Independent? Or indeed, have you received an apology from ministers for once again announcing government policy in the press before doing so in the House?
Order. What I would say to the Honourable Lady really is as follows. First of all, there are many ways in which she can continue to pursue this matter, but the route of a point of order will not be one of them. Secondly, I think that she will understand me when I say that I don't want to get into the business of acting as umpire between competing reports in, I won't say the popular newspapers, but what apparently are described as newspapers. I will leave these institutions to make their own observations. No minister has apologised to me at this stage, but if I receive an apology, I can assure the Honourable Lady, in respect of this matter, she will learn without delay. Point of order, Mr. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, one of your principal responsibilities is protecting the freedom of speech and action of members of this House. Accordingly, I draw your attention to an action taken by the Attorney-General of Northern Ireland on the last day before recess, when he started proceedings against the Right Honourable Member for Neath under a criminal action described, I think, as scandalising the court, a criminal action which was described in 1899 as obsolete. The problem here is that our freedom of speech to criticise the judiciary and judicial process is fundamental to the operation of this House. Accordingly, can you tell me, Mr. Speaker, whether on the one hand you have had an application for the United Kingdom Attorney-General to come to the House and explain what he will do to protect our rights, and if not, what the officials and officers of the House led by you will do to protect those rights ourselves?
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his point of order. The answer to the first of his inquiries is that no, I have received no such approach. I shall seek to address the second of his concerns in what I say. I have listened carefully and, if I may say so, respectfully to what the Right Honourable Gentleman has said. These are extremely important matters, and there are issues of devolved responsibility and possibly sub judice. I will reflect further on what the Right Honourable Gentleman has said and revert to him if necessary. In the meantime, I know, and I think I can say this with great confidence, that he will draw upon the skills and willingness to assist of the Table Office. I hope that that is helpful to him and to the House. Order.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Chris Bryant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary said that it was not a good idea to warn Abu Qatada that he was about to be arrested, which obviously poses the question, was he then going to be able to abscond? But she maintains that this is why she couldn't tell this House first. She also suggested that there had been no briefing to the media. However, the precise words of the Evening Standard, which was published before this House sat today, are: a deportation order to send Abu Qatada to Jordan and allow him to be put back behind bars will be issued within days. Home Secretary Theresa May said today, not will say today, will say in the next few days, but said today. It was published before she came into the House. It was published before this House sat, and it goes on in precise terms to detail every single element of what the Home Secretary has said to this House this afternoon. So, Mr. Speaker, will you investigate precisely why and how this came to pass? Because surely, at least on matters of national security, where the public needs to have confidence in government and in the parliamentary process, Parliament should hear first. And will you also confirm that that if Mr. Qatada is not under detention at the end of today, it is perfectly possible for the Home Secretary to return to this House to explain why not?
I will rule on that, but as the honourable gentleman has raised a point of order that directly relates to Home Secretary, and the Home Secretary is in her place, she does have the opportunity to respond if she wishes to do so.
For this House, Mr. Speaker, that I gave no such briefing to the press in relation to this. What I said in response to the Right Honourable Lady was her suggestion that SIAC had not been properly informed, and I made the point that actually, obviously, the number of people who were aware that the arrest was about to take place was limited into the number of places. There were, however, a number of journalists, as I understand it, outside Abu Qatada's house and have been at various stages over the last 3 months, and therefore, when action was taken, it was only, of course, to be expected that that was available to the media.
Order. I'm happy to respond to the point of order from the honourable gentleman. First of all, what I would say is I've had no opportunity to make any direct comparison of the text of that which is reported in the Evening Standard on the one hand and the content of the Home Secretary's statement on the other. Secondly, as has already been said, it is commonplace for there to be heavy media speculation in circumstances of this kind. However, thirdly, I do take this opportunity forcefully to underline the crucial importance of statements of this kind, and indeed all significant statements of government policy, being made first to the House. I should say, or I will at any rate say, that the Home Secretary did me the courtesy of contacting me over the weekend, and we discussed her desire to make a statement today, and of course I pointed out that it was extremely important, if the statement was not to be made until Tuesday, that nothing of it emerged in advance into the public domain, to which proposition I know the Home Secretary readily agreed. I don't think I can say more than that now, but these things must first be revealed to the House and not outside. And although, of course, there are many actors on the stage, not least within departments and other organisations, ministers are responsible for everything that is said by those within their department. And I know that's a responsibility of which the Home Secretary will be keenly conscious. If there are no further points of order, we come now to the 10-minute rule motion. Mr. John Healey. Order. Point of order, Mr. Ed Balls.
Mr. Speaker, before the Prime Minister leaves, the Prime Minister just told the House in Prime Minister's questions that the 50p rate does not raise any money, a claim which is flatly contradicted both by the documents published on Budget Day and the Treasury's own figures published on Monday. Could the Prime Minister correct the record before he leaves the House, Mr. Speaker?
Order! These matters will be the subject of debate later today, and if I didn't know the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Morley and Outward, as well as I do, I would think that he was trying to use the device of a contrived point of order to continue the debate. But because I know him as well as I do, he can take it from me that I know he wouldn't be guilty of such unworthy conduct. Point of order, Mr. Paul Flynn.
Can I ask you to consider the situation we have, because the backbench committee have only one slot which they can allocate, and they had 9 applications. One of those applications was asking for this Parliament to follow the example of the Australian decision and the decisions in Canada and in the Netherlands to withdraw their troops independently from Afghanistan. Isn't it a shame that procedure is preventing this Parliament from taking the decision that we can act independently to withdraw our troops and remove them from a conflict that very few people now believe in?
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that he's a wily and mature bird of a very distinct pedigree. And the honourable gentleman has penned a book, recently updated and republished, on how to be an MP and how to operate as a backbencher. And it's a much-thumbed tome, and he uses every device to get his concerns across, and that's what he's done. What I would say to him, though, is that all sorts of things are a shame, or a pity, or regrettable, but sadly they're not matters for the chair. Now, I think that the honourable gentleman would like them to be matters for the chair, but unfortunately they're not. We'll have to leave it there for today. If there are no further points of order, we come now to the 10-minute rule motion for which the Right Honourable Gentleman Member for Leicester East has been so patiently waiting. 10-minute rule motion, Mr Keith Vatt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Amendments and new clauses. Point of order, Mr John MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The main thrust of the Financial Services Bill was to gain some element of...
Can I appeal to members who are planning to leave the chamber to do so quickly and quietly, so the honourable gentleman has the courtesy of a House listening while he raises his point of order. Mr John MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The main thrust of the Financial Services Bill was to secure corporate responsibility within the financial sector of this country, and yet the batch of amendments which were not reached specifically dealt with corporate responsibility. Could I, through you, Mr Speaker, convey maybe a message to the Leader of the House who is present that there is a second day of this bill debate, and it may well be that he'd want to look again at the programme motion to see whether or not we could debate the important elements of these amendments on that second day.
To the honourable gentleman for his point of order, and I say two things to him in response. First, as he can see with his own eyes, the Leader of the House is in his place and will have heard the point the honourable gentleman has raised. Secondly, business questions on Thursday will be a good opportunity for the honourable gentleman further to pursue this matter, and knowing his indefatigability, I expect to see him in his place on that occasion. Point of order, Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On a point of order, Mr Speaker, that I believe that you've had advance notice of, I am seeking your guidance of how best to elicit a response from the Treasury Department on a number of questions that I have asked for on the average tax paid at different high income levels. On the 28th of February, I tabled 3 written parliamentary questions to the Treasury, numbers 97755, 97800 and 97801, for named answers on the 5th of March. I received a holding reply. On the 27th of March, I submitted a further named written question asking when I would receive a response to the previous written questions. On the 16th of April, I received a further holding reply. With the House shortly to prorogue and the danger that these questions will fall if not answered before proroguement, I would appreciate your advice, Mr Speaker, as how best I might receive response to these questions. Intentional or accidental, it is inexcusable and an insult to democracy. I hope you can help me with this.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady for her point of order and for advance notice of her intention to raise it. Ordinarily, what I would say to the honourable lady and to any other member who was dissatisfied with an answer was that that member should consider taking the matter up with the Procedure Committee, which monitors these matters. And in general terms, I stand by that advice. However, where the objection of the honourable member is not to content of answer being in some way unsatisfactory or out of kilter with the spirit of what the House expects, but rather the objection is that there has been no substantive reply at all, it is an extremely serious concern which was flagged up several times earlier in this Parliament and indeed in the last. And what I would say to the honourable lady is that I hope that the presence of the Leader of the House and his deputy on the Treasury bench will suffice to ensure that the relevant ministers are chased with some urgency to provide substantive, not holding, substantive replies to the questions posed before the House prorogues, thereby avoiding the need for the honourable lady to have to revert to the matter in the new session. It won't do for ministers simply to wait several days or even weeks and then to reply by saying, "I will reply as soon as possible." The Leader of the House and I share a distaste for that practice. Yes. Point of order, Harriet Harman.
Mr Speaker,
On a point of order, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport assured the House that in respect of the News Corps bid for B Sky B, that he was acting as Secretary of State in a quasi-judicial capacity and, above all, in a way that was impartial and fair. Mr. Speaker, in view of the evidence that has been adduced before the Leveson inquiry today, it appears that the Secretary of State has fallen woefully short of the standards expected by his office and by the public interest. Mr. Speaker, I believe, on a point of order, that the right thing for the Secretary of State to do would be to come to this House to offer an apology and to tender his resignation.
Can I just... Well, I'll take a very brief further to that from the Right Honourable Gentleman, who is the former Secretary of State for Culture, Media, Olympics and Sport, and then I will respond to the point of order. Point of order, Mr. Ben Bradshaw.
Given that on the July the 20th last year it was the Culture Secretary himself who said that any conversations the Prime Minister had had with James Murdoch were irrelevant, specifically because he, the Culture Secretary, was taking this decision in a quasi-judicial way, isn't it paramount that the Prime Minister also comes to this House to correct the record at the earliest opportunity?
I think if there is a matter of privilege being raised, honourable or right honourable members should write to me about it. I do feel, on the strength of what I've heard, that I'm quite able to respond. And what I can say to the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Olympics, Media and Sport and to the Right Honourable Gentleman is that I've received no indication from the Secretary of State that he intends to come to this House. The point that the Right Honourable and Learned Lady and the Right Honourable Gentleman has made is clear, on the record, and will have been widely heard. I'm not intending to allow this matter to run for any length of time, but I'm prepared to hear the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Rhondda, and we'll see how it goes. The Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. There may be an issue of privilege, and you're absolutely right. If anybody on this side of the House wants to allege that the Secretary of State has lied to this House, then that's a matter of privilege and we should write to you. Notwithstanding the fact that the Committee of Privilege is in a slightly complicated position at the moment because it's being reconstituted. But surely the matter is not actually... It may also be a matter for this House in a different way, because the Code of Conduct for Ministers is not only a matter for the Prime Minister, but is also written into this House as a resolution of this House. Surely it is appropriate that the Minister should be coming here to explain himself in relation to the Code of Conduct and this House.
Well, I note what the Honourable Gentleman has said. He also, I hope, will have noted what I said, which is that what the Right Honourable Lady and the Right Honourable Gentleman said will have been heard on the Treasury bench, and I think it is a safe prediction that it will have been heard by the Secretary of State at whom it has been directed. And I don't think now there's anything that I need to add or can usefully add. The observations have been made and they're on the record, and I thank Right Honourable and Honourable members for those comments. I wouldn't want the Honourable Lady to feel that she's been unjustly excluded or discriminated against in any way, for that's not my practice, as she knows. So we must hear the Honourable Lady.
Thank you indeed very much, Mr. Speaker, because there is another dimension of the evidence heard today and the revelations at the Leveson inquiry. And can I ask that the Secretary of State for Scotland be called to this House because of the revelations and implications to the people of Scotland about the allegations made about Alex Salmond and his involvement in these matters, which are of great concern to the people of Scotland, and I think they bear further examination.
Well, again, what I would say to the Honourable Lady is that the Treasury bench will have heard what the Honourable Lady has to say, and the person to whom she has just referred will also have heard, or will hear very soon, what she's had to say. It's not a matter for the Chair today. I've heard the points of order. I have responded in such a way as I think is proper at this time, and I think we will have to leave it there for the present. If there are no further unrelated points of order. Point of order, Dr. Roberta Blackman-Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would appreciate your ruling on the appropriateness of commencing this important debate on the MPPF with only about half an hour of parliamentary time available. Surely this is shambolic organisation that mirrors the MPPF process itself. Can you tell me whether it's possible to have this debate rescheduled, bearing in mind the commitment that was given by the Minister in this House on the 27th of March to have a full parliamentary debate on this subject?
To the Honourable Lady for her point of order. The time available for this debate was always to be a function of the amount of time taken by earlier proceedings and therefore what was left at the end. However, as the scheduling of business is a matter for the government, and the Minister leading the debate is here, and no less a figure than the Deputy Leader of the House is in his place, it is open to, though not obligatory for, either of those distinguished honourable or right honourable members to respond to the Honourable Lady's point of order if either wishes to do so. Minister Clark.
Mr. Speaker, I am anxious to get on with the debate. I have some indications from my honourable and right honourable friends that though we may commence the debate this evening, it will be possible for us to continue it during the days ahead. So I hope that we can make a start and that members can make their contribution to this very important subject.
Full to the right honourable gentleman for what he's just said, we now come to the motion relating to the National Planning Policy Framework, and I wish to deny the Minister, who is so eager and enthusiastic, not a moment longer. Minister Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The debate has lapsed. Point of order, Dr. Julian Lewis.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order of which I have given you notice, very recently, in the course of an adjournment debate, both an honourable Labour member and myself were refused by a minister the opportunity to make a brief intervention while he had the floor. He explained in all sincerity afterwards that he thought it was the case that one had to ask permission in advance of an adjournment debate, both of the person whose adjournment debate it is and of the minister concerned, whether one could make such an intervention. For the sake of clarity, would you make a pronouncement on this? And if it is, as I suspect, that interventions do not require this sort of prior permission, would you undertake to let ministers know for the future?
The honourable gentleman for his point of order and for advance notice of his intention to raise it. The answer is that permission to intervene in an adjournment debate is not required from the Minister, from the member whose debate it is, or from the Chair. The permission is required if a member is seeking to make a speech in the debate. I'm constantly struck by how little understood this important distinction is between interventions which do not require permission and speeches which do. I hope the position is now clear to the honourable gentleman and to the House, and I'm very happy to inform ministers more widely, either directly or through the good offices of the right honourable gentleman who serves as the patronage secretary and who conveniently is loitering with or without intent. I hope that's helpful.
Point of order.
Point of order, Caroline Flint.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, in answer to a parliamentary question, the government revealed that despite rejecting nearly 30,000 families who applied for help with insulation through Warmfront, there was an
Be helpful if members would have the courtesy not to yell out "well done" when a point of order is being raised. People can't, on the one hand, complain about other people's parliamentary manners and display a deficit on their own part. Let's have a bit of order. Caroline Flint.
This is very important for families facing high energy bills around the country. As I said, in answer to a parliamentary question, the government revealed that despite rejecting nearly 30,000 families who applied for help with insulation through Warmfront, there was an underspend of over £50 million last year. This comes on top of information I obtained last week, which showed that the energy companies are not going to meet the obligations Labour put on them to help households with energy efficiency. Given that the House might rise before energy and climate change orals next Thursday, is there any indication that DEC ministers plan to come to this House and explain how they've left Warmfront in such a shambles?
I had no such indication, but the Right Honourable Lady and I came into the House together in 1997, so on the strength of knowing her for 15 years, I know that she's not inclined to let go of the bone. Point of order, Mr. Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last July, the Prime Minister, I tried to warn him that I was going to raise this. He's obviously left the chamber now. But last July, the Prime Minister published a list of all the meetings he had with proprietors, editors and senior media executives between May 2010 and July 2011. It details only one meeting with Rupert Murdoch between May and July of 2011. However, Rupert Murdoch this afternoon, this has been published by the Leveson inquiry, makes clear that there were meetings with the Prime Minister on the 18th of May, the 25th of May, the 21st of July, another one on the 21st of July, and another on the 22nd of July. My point of order is to ask you whether something that is laid in the library of the House is just as much a matter of privilege. In other words, if somebody has misled the House, that it's just as serious a matter if it's something that has been tabled in the library of the House as if it's said in the chamber.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. All members, including the Prime Minister, are responsible for the accuracy of what they say to the House, and my implicit assumption is that that includes material lodged with the House. I'm happy to take further advice on that, but there is an encouraging nod from a sedentary position from the Clerk of the House, and that provides me with succour. Beyond that, I would simply say that members should be careful in what they say if, and I emphasise if, they are not asking a question but making an accusation. I simply say that for the general knowledge and enrichment of the House. But I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his point of order. If there are no further points of order, consideration completed. Third reading what day? Tomorrow. Thank you. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. Point of order, just in case I hadn't heard, the honourable gentleman was kindly in his consideration. Point of order, Mr. Robert Flello.
Mr. Speaker, Herman Henry Diaz, a leading Fenso Agro Colombian trade union activist, is suspected of having been forcibly disappeared a few days ago. He was organising a delegation of activists from the Putumayo department. He was last seen in Puerto Vega area, as I say, a few days ago, a region heavily militarised, which raises real concerns that he may have been detained or worse by the Colombian army, who have fought on this. I personally met Mr. Diaz. Can I ask through you, Mr. Speaker, whether the Foreign Secretary would be prepared to make immediate representations calling for his release and for the Colombian authorities to guarantee his safety?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his point of order. I can't speak for the Foreign Secretary on this matter, and I have no knowledge that the Foreign Secretary is present in the House today, or no certain knowledge to the contrary. But knowing the way these things work and the efficiency of the mandarins of the Foreign Office, I confidently predict that the content of the honourable gentleman's point of order will be winging its way to the Foreign Secretary or his officials very soon. More particularly in the interim, his concern is on the record, and I thank him for putting his concern on the record. If there are no further points of order, we come now to